Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to cut through the noise and understand what's really important fast. We get it.
hmm
Today, we're handing you a cheat sheet to a fascinating, if slightly mind-blowing piece called Situational Awareness, The Decade Ahead. This is by Leopold Aschenbrenner from June 2024.
Right.
Now, while the author once worked at OpenAI, what we're digging into is built on public info, his own thinking, general knowledge of the field, and, well, a healthy dose of San Francisco insider chatter.
Yeah, and what really grabbed our attention about this document is its core prediction. I mean, that we could see artificial general intelligence AI at human level as soon as 2027,
2027, yeah.
and then a rapid climb to superintelligence right after. And this
Mm.
isn't just a wild guess. It's based on like concrete trends in computing power, smarter algorithms, and what the author calls unhobbling.
Right, unhovered.
Basically, removing the brakes on current AI.
Exactly. And what's really compelling is where the author is coming from. He sees himself as part of this small group, mostly in the thick of it in San Francisco in the AI labs, who have a clear-eyed view of just how quickly things are moving.
Yeah, he contrasts it with past skepticism.
Right. He does. He contrasts this with past skepticism about AI, even drawing parallels to the folks at the forefront of nuclear physics like, Szilard, Oppenheimer, and Teller, which gives you a sense of the potential scale of what we're talking about here.
It puts it in perspective.
Okay.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to break down the key arguments in this document that support this surprisingly near-term AGI.
Okay.
We'll look at the major challenges Aschenbrenner anticipates and explore what it all could mean if he's right. Think of this as your rapid download of the essential insights from this really significant piece of work.
All right, let's jump into the heart of it then. AGI by 2027. A key concept here is counting the OMEM's orders of magnitude. Can you unpack what that means for us?
Sure. Counting the OMs is essentially a way to forecast AI progress by tracking how much things are improving. Think of it as powers of 10.
Okay.
The author focuses on three main engines of this progress. The raw muscle of computing power used to train these models,
The compute, right.
the cleverness of the algorithms themselves, and those unhobbling gains that unlock hidden abilities. Each order of magnitude increase in, any of these areas suggests a significant leap in what AI can do.
Okay, so let's look back a bit to see this in action. The document talks about the jump from GPT-2 in 2019 to GPT-4 in 2023, just 4 years. How did AI capabilities change in that time?
It was astonishing acceleration. GPT-2 in 2019 is described as having the smarts of roughly a preschooler.
Wow, preschooler.
Yeah. It could string together semi-reasonable sentences and occasionally cough up a correct answer to a simple factual question, basic stuff.
Right.
Then came GPT-3 in 2020, what the author calls clunky old GPT-3, not the more refined 3.5 version we know from ChatGPT.
Okay, the early version.
This was more like an elementary schooler, more consistently coherent, able to fix your grammar, do basic math, and it started to be commercially useful for basic online content, SEO, that kind of thing.
Right, and then GPT-4 landed in 2023, and that really seemed to turn heads.
Absolutely. GPT-4's abilities are called a shock to many. It could write sophisticated code and essays, tackle difficult math problems, and even ace college-level exams.
Yeah.
The author reminds us that just a short time ago, many thought these tasks were way, way beyond AI. He points to GPT-4's scores on things like AP exams and the SAT, outperforming most high schoolers. His key takeaway is that a lot of what still limits GPT-4 isn't the lack of underlying intelligence, but rather these hobbles that are holding it back.
That's a really interesting point, untapped potential. The document even uses the math data set, those notoriously difficult high school math competition problems, as an example. What happened there?
That's a perfect illustration of this rapid advancement. The author mentions that when the math data set came out, a colleague thought it was a waste of time because AI was nowhere near that level.
Shows what they knew.
Right. Initially, in mid-2021, the best models were only getting around 5% of the problems right. Just 5%.
Okay.
But in just 1 year, by mid-2022, that jumped to 50%.
Wow, 5 to 50 in a year.
And now, these problems are basically solved with accuracy rates above 90%, way, way beyond what experts had predicted.
Incredible. So with that in mind, let's break down those three engines of progress: compute, algorithmic efficiencies, and unhobbling gains. Let's start with compute. What trends have we seen and what's the outlook?
Sure. When we talk about compute, we mean the sheer amount of processing power thrown at training these massive models. The document cites estimates from Epoch AI.
Right.
They figured GPT-2 used about 4021 FLOPs. That's, a technical measure, a lot of calculations per second. GPT-3 jumped to around 323 FLOPs in 2020, about 100 times more. That's 2 ohms.
100 times. Okay.
And GPT-4, somewhere between 8024 and 4025 FLOPs, another significant leap, maybe 1.5 to 2 ohms again.
Okay.
The author stresses that we're now at a point where each new generation of models requires building entirely new, much larger supercomputing clusters. Think of it like needing a bigger factory for each new product release.
Got it. And looking ahead to the end of 2027, what kind of computing power does the author anticipate? Another big leap.
Based on his analysis, yeah, he believes we're very likely to see another 100-fold increase in compute by the end of 2027. Another 2 ohms.
Wow.
That's the scale of a training run that could cost tens of billions of dollars.
Tens of billions.
He even suggests that a 1,000-fold increase, 3 ohms, a $100 billion-plus run is within the realm of possibility and is even rumored for Microsoft and OpenAI.
That's just an almost unimaginable level of investment. Now, the second driver is algorithmic efficiencies. The document suggests this could be just as crucial as raw computing power. How so?
Yeah, algorithmic progress means finding smarter ways for AI to learn. The author circles back to that math benchmark.
Okay.
The cost to get to around 50% accuracy on those problems dropped by nearly 1,000 times 3 ohms in less than 2 years.
1,000 times cheaper.
Exactly. That shows that even with less raw computing power, better algorithms can lead to huge gains in performance. It's like suddenly figuring out the shortcuts in a video game. You can achieve the same result with far less effort, or maybe a much better result with the same effort.
So it's about quality of learning, not just quantity of processing.
Precisely. The document distinguishes between within-paradigm improvements, better base models that act like compute multipliers, getting you more bang for your processing buck,
Okay.
and unhobbling, which we'll get to next. And it's about unlocking entirely new abilities. The author notes that historically, between 2012 and 2021, we saw about half an O, roughly a 5-fold improvement in algorithmic efficiency each year.
Right.
He also figures that about half the performance jump from GPT-3 to GPT-4 might have come from smarter algorithms, partly based on stable API cost, despite much better performance and things like chinchilla scaling laws.
Interesting.
So his overall expectation is for another 1 to 3 OMs, that's 10 to 1,000 times improvement in algorithmic efficiency by the end of 2027 compared to GPT-4, with a best guess of around 2 OMs, or a 100-fold improvement.
Okay, that leads us to the third driver, unhobbling gains. This sounds really important. What does that involve?
Unhobbling is about removing the obvious limitations and unlocking the hidden potential of the underlying AI models. The author gives several examples.
Like what?
Well, reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, is one that's where humans guide the AI's learning. Chain of thought prompting, getting the AI to show its reasoning steps, is another.
Right, showing its work.
Exactly. Then there's giving the AI tools like access to a web browser or the ability to run code. And scaffolding, which is structuring tasks to help the AI reason better, also falls into this category. Think of it like giving a talented but unfocused person the right training, the right tools, and a clear process to follow. Their inherent ability doesn't change, but their output skyrockets.
And these unhobbling techniques can really boost performance, huh?
Absolutely. The document mentions a survey by Epoch AI that found these techniques can lead to effective compute gains of 5 to 30 times on many benchmarks. Another group, METR, saw huge jumps in performance on complex multi-step tasks just by using better post-training methods, giving the AI tools, and structuring the problem-solving process more effectively.
How big a jump are we talking?
They saw performance jump from just 5% to nearly 40% on the same base GPT-4 model.
Yeah.
Just by, improving how we used and prompted.
Wow, same model, huge difference. The document also highlights how dramatically increasing the context length, the amount of information the AI can process at once, can change things.
Oh yeah, that's a huge unhobbling factor.
Yeah.
Models have gone from remembering about, a page and a half of text with GPT-3
It's tiny.
to being able to hold thousands of pages in their working memory with models like Gemini 1.5 Pro, 1 million tokens or more.
That's massive.
The author points out that more context can act like a massive efficiency boost. For example, a smaller but well-informed model can outperform a much larger but less context-aware one. He gives the amazing example of Gemini 1.5 Pro, learning to translate a completely new language, Calamang, at a human level
Yeah.
just by being given a dictionary and grammar rules within its massive context window.
Just from the context, no extra training.
Right. It's like being able to learn a new subject just by reading one very detailed textbook instantly.
Incredible. So what are some of the remaining hobbles that the author thinks could be overcome in the next few years leading up to 2027?
He points to three key areas. First, solving the onboarding problem.
Onboarding, like a new employee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right now, even the smartest AI is like a brilliant new hire who knows nothing about your company's specific data or workflows. The author believes that with these massive context windows, we should be able to effectively onboard these models, giving them access to internal documents, past communications, code bases, just like we would a human employee.
Makes sense. What's second?
Second is addressing the test time compute overhang. Currently, models are mostly limited to relatively short bursts of thinking.
Like quick answers.
Yeah. The author asks, what if they could spend the equivalent of hours, days, or even months of focused processing on a single complex problem? He includes a table showing how many tokens of processing would roughly equate to different amounts of human work time,
Oh, interesting.
suggesting that unlocking much longer thought processes could lead to huge leaps in capability, potentially as significant as the jump from GPT-3 to GPT-4 just by letting them think longer at test time.
So trading time for capability.
Kind of. He references AI for the game of Hex, where more thinking time can make up for less training.
Hmm.
He suggests unlocking, say, 4 ohms of test time compute could be like getting 3 ohms of pre-training compute.
Wow.
He does note, though, that while long context models are getting good at taking in information, generating very long, coherent outputs is still a challenge.
That makes sense. We all know some problems take extended periods of focused thought to solve. What's the third key area for potential unhobbling?
The third area is simply enabling AI to interact with computers the way we do, not just using isolated tools, but fully navigating our digital world, joining meetings, doing online research, sending messages, using various applications and development tools.
Like a digital assistant, but way more capable.
Exactly. The author envisions a future where AI becomes a true remote worker that can handle complex projects independently over long periods.
So, putting it all together, what kind of leap in capability does the author predict by the end of 2027?
He anticipates another jump in capability roughly on par with what we saw between GPT-2 and GPT-4.
That was huge.
It was. That previous leap involved an estimated 4.5 to 6 orders of magnitude of effective compute, combining the raw power and the algorithmic gains, plus significant unhobbling that took us from basic text generation to more interactive and capable models. For the next 4 years, he projects another 3 to 6 orders of magnitude of effective compute, with a best guess of around 5 OMs, alongside further major breakthroughs in unhobbling.
So, another GPT-2 to GPT-4 level jump by 2027. It sounds like the author's very optimistic about this timeline. But he does acknowledge potential hurdles, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He highlights the significant uncertainties. A big one is potential data limitations, the concern that we might be running out of readily available internet data to train these ever larger models.
The data wall.
Right. He mentions the possibility of progress slowing down if we hit this data wall and don't find new ways to generate training data, maybe like the self-play techniques used in AlphaGo.
But there's upside risk, too.
Exactly. He also points out that new algorithmic breakthroughs, particularly in further unhobbling latent abilities, could lead to even faster progress. So there are error bars, definitely.
But despite these uncertainties, the author strongly believes in achieving true AGI by 2027. How does he define AGI in this context? What does that mean to him?
His definition of AGI is quite specific. An AI system that could fully automate the jobs of himself and his colleagues, who are AI researchers and engineers, including the work of doing AI research itself.
AI researching AI.
Right. He argues that once AI reaches this point, it will create powerful feedback loops, with AI rapidly improving itself and quickly leading to superintelligence.
Okay, so we've looked at the case for AGI by 2027. Now the document turns to what happens next. This idea of an intelligence explosion. That sounds pretty dramatic.
It is. The author argues that AI progress won't just plateau at human-level intelligence. It won't stop there.
Right.
He introduces the concept of an intelligence explosion, where potentially hundreds of millions of AGIs could be deployed to automate the process of AI research itself.
Hundreds of millions.
This could compress what might normally take decades of algorithmic progress, maybe 5 or more orders of magnitude into a single year. or even less.
That's an almost unimaginable acceleration. What would be the main driver of this explosion?
The automation of AI research is presented as the key. The author addresses the common pushback that AI might struggle with things like robotics or biology research that require physical lab work.
Yeah, the physical world stuff.
His point is that automating the thinking part, the AI research, is enough to drive progress everywhere else eventually. You solve the core intelligence problem, the rest follows.
And how does he envision this massive increase in research capacity? Where do these hundreds of millions of AI researchers come from?
He points to the anticipated growth in the number of powerful GPUs available. By 2027, he expects tens of millions of A100 equivalent GPUs.
Okay.
He does some rough calculations, suggesting that this level of computing power could potentially run the equivalent of 100 to 200 million human researchers working around the clock.
How does he get to that number?
He bases this on estimates of how quickly humans think in terms of language tokens, maybe 100 tokens a minute, and extrapolating current trends and how efficiently AI models can process information. It's a rough estimate, but it gives a sense of scale.
Huge scale.
Yeah. He also mentions the possibility of running these AI researchers much faster than humans, say 10 or even 100 times faster, by maybe trading off the number running in parallel versus their individual thinking speed.
That's a radical idea. Does the author address potential counter-arguments to this idea of a rapid intelligence explosion? People must push back on this.
Oh yeah, he tackles several.
Hmm.
One is the concern that algorithmic progress might slow down, that we've picked the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
He counters by saying that our current AI architectures and training methods are still quite basic, maybe rudimentary, and that looking at biology, there are likely much more efficient ways to learn still undiscovered.
Yeah, the brain is way more efficient.
Exactly. Another concern is that as AI gets smarter, the really big ideas will become harder to find, so these automated researchers might just sustain the current pace, not accelerate it dramatically.
Diminishing returns on ideas.
Right. The author acknowledges this, but argues that the sheer scale of the increase in research power, potentially a millionfold, is likely far more than what would be needed just to keep things moving at the current rate. He thinks it'll overwhelm diminishing returns for a while.
Okay. And what about just diminishing returns in general? The explosion fizzling out.
He considers that too, suggesting that while diminishing returns will eventually kick in, the initial surge in research capacity will likely be so massive it overcomes them for a significant period, allowing for substantial algorithmic leaks, several ohms of progress before it potentially slows.
Beyond just the sheer number of researchers, what other advantages would these automated AI researchers have over human researchers?
He highlights several potential qualitative advantages. They could run vastly more experiments simultaneously, for instance, training hundreds of thousands of different versions of a powerful AI model in a single year to test new ideas.
That's a scale humans just can't match.
Not even close. They might also be better at designing experiments and allocating resources efficiently. And perhaps most significantly, he suggests they could achieve qualitatively superhuman insights.
Superhuman insights.
Yeah, drawing an analogy to the unexpected and brilliant strategies AlphaGo discovered in the game of Go.
Ah, the Move 37 moment.
Exactly. He posits that AI could find hidden exploits in code or generate solutions that are simply beyond human understanding. He compares it to the difference between a high school student learning basic Newtonian physics and a superintelligence exploring the complexities of quantum mechanics.
Or like those video game speedruns he mentions.
Yeah, he uses that analogy too incredibly fast, sometimes incomprehensible strategies that achieve goals in ways humans never conceived. That kind of alien proficiency.
This paints a picture of a really rapid and dramatic shift. What does the document say about the implications of this swift transition to superintelligence?
The author emphasizes that humanity will face an incredibly rapid and extreme situation in the 2030s as a result of superintelligence. He argues that these systems would be far more alien in their intelligence than even human-level AGI,
More alien. How so?
just operating on principles and at speeds we can't grasp. He raises the serious concern of a potential loss of control as we increasingly rely on and trust systems vastly more intelligent than ourselves.
Handing over the reins.
Potentially. And he notes that many leading scientists in AI labs actually find this scenario of a rapid intelligence explosion to be, well, surprisingly plausible. It's not just fringe thinking within those circles.
This all sounds incredibly high stakes. The document then moves to the major challenges we face. What are the key hurdles identified?
The author lays out three main challenges. First, the monumental task of racing to the trillion-dollar cluster, the massive build-out of computing infrastructure needed. Second, the absolutely critical need to lock down the labs and ensure the security of these advanced AI systems, keeping the secrets safe.
Security, right.
And third, the profound and difficult problem of superalignment. How do we reliably control AI systems that are far, far smarter than we are?
Control. Okay, let's take these one at a time. First, racing to the trillion-dollar cluster. What exactly does that involve, this massive build-out?
This refers to the astonishing rate of technological and financial investment currently happening in AI. It's accelerating like crazy.
The techno-capital feedback loop?
Right. The author projects that as AI revenue continues its exponential growth, total annual spending on AI could top $1 trillion by 2027.
$1 trillion a year.
$1 trillion a year. This would pave the way for individual training runs costing hundreds of billions of dollars as early as 2028.
Hundreds of billions for one training run.
And these clusters would demand enormous amounts of power comparable to a small or medium-sized U.S. state, he estimates. And cost-wise, maybe exceeding the cost of the International Space Station for a single cluster.
Wow. The document gives some specific examples of this massive investment, doesn't it? What stands out?
Yeah, he mentions reports of huge investments and future plans, like Mark Zuckerberg's reported purchase of 350,000 high-end NVIDIA H100 GPUs.
It's a lot of chips.
It is. Amazon's acquisition of a massive data center campus near a nuclear power plant, capable of using 1 gigawatt of power. Rumors of a similarly sized cluster being built in Kuwait around 2026.
Kuwait, interesting.
And the rumored $100 billion supercomputing project from Microsoft and OpenAI for 2028, which, as he notes, is in the same cost ballpark as the entire International Space Station. He also points out that this rapid progress could fuel even more aggressive investment. It's investment-led.
The idea of $1 trillion cluster is almost impossible to picture. What kind of scale are we talking about physically?
Well, the author estimates that such a cluster, representing maybe 4 OMs, or a 10,000-fold increase in computing power beyond what was used for GPT-4 and potentially emerging around 2030 based on current trends, it would require an astounding 100 gigawatts of power. 100 gigawatts, how much is that? To put that in perspective, that's more than 20% of the entire electricity currently generated in the United States for one cluster.
That's staggering.
He suggests this wouldn't just be a massive warehouse of chips, but would necessitate hundreds of power plants. He even wonders if it might require a national-level effort, like a moonshot, to achieve.
And what does he see as the biggest bottleneck in the near term for this kind of build-out? What stops us just building it tomorrow?
Power. Power is the most immediate constraint he identifies. He points out that there isn't a lot of spare electricity capacity just lying around.
Right.
And building new, large-scale power plants, especially things like nuclear, takes a decade or more. He even raises the slightly wild possibility of tech companies acquiring power-intensive industries just to secure their existing energy supplies.
Buying smelters for their power contracts.
Maybe. He does offer some potential solutions for the power issue within the U.S., though, right? It's not impossible.
Yes. He argues that the U.S. has substantial natural gas reserves and could power, say, a 10-gigawatt cluster with a relatively small portion of current production, maybe a few percent, and we could potentially increase production fairly quickly if needed.
Okay, so gas is an option.
He estimates that around $100 billion in investment could provide 100 gigawatts of natural gas power generation capacity, and these plants can be built much faster than nuclear. Solar and batteries are mentioned, but maybe less straightforward for this kind of constant massive load.
What about the actual chips themselves? We hear about shortages. Is the supply of advanced AI chips expected to be a problem for $1 trillion cluster?
It's a constraint, but maybe manageable with enough investment. The author believes that while the AI chips produced in, say, 2024 could almost be enough for a multi-hundred billion dollar cluster if they were all dedicated to one project.
Okay.
The total demand for AI chips by 2030, considering not just training but also running these models, the inference side will likely exceed the entire current leading-edge manufacturing capacity of TSMC, the main chip maker.
So we need more fabs, massively more. This would require huge expansions in chip fabrication plants, potentially costing over $1 trillion in capital expenditure just for the fabs. He also points to near-term bottlenecks in things like CoWoS advanced packaging and high bandwidth memory, HBM, which are crucial components for AI GPUs.
There's also a geopolitical aspect to this, isn't there? Where these massive clusters are built could have significant implications. He mentioned Kuwait.
Absolutely. The author questions whether the U.S. really wants this critical AI infrastructure, the foundation of future power, to be controlled by entities outside of the U.S. and allied nations, especially in potentially unstable regions where some are rumored to be considering large-scale AI buildouts.
Makes sense.
He strongly advocates for prioritizing the construction of these clusters within the U.S. and in allied democratic countries like Japan and South Korea, and suggests a similar focus for advanced chip manufacturing, keep it close, or of trusted partners.
Okay, the second major challenge, locking down the lab's security for AGI. This sounds like a really critical vulnerability based on his tone.
The author's quite direct, even blunt on this. He argues that leading AI labs in the U.S. are treating security almost like an afterthought
Really?
and are essentially, in his view, handing over the key ingredients for achieving AGI to the Chinese government, the CCP.
Wow. What are these key ingredients he's talking about? It's not just the final model.
No. He explains that a fully trained AI model, AGI itself, is essentially a massive file containing the model's learned parameters, the weights. That's billions or trillions of numbers.
Okay.
But he stresses that the crucial algorithmic secrets, the specific technical breakthroughs, the methods, the architectures, the training recipes used to build that AGI are just as important, if not more so.
The how-to guide.
Exactly. He warns that if these are stolen, China could rapidly close the gap with the U.S., launch its own intelligence explosion, and erase any American lead in this vital technology.
He gives some examples of how these secrets could be leaked, right? It's not just hacking.
Correct. He mentions researchers moving between labs and even between countries' talent flow. The trend of open source research in AI, while good for science, can be a security risk.
Yeah.
And the fact that export controls on NVIDIA chips might be less effective than securing the underlying algorithmic knowledge. He emphasizes that the key paradigm shifts needed to overcome data limitations and actually reach AGI are likely happening right now, and these inventions are as critical as the initial breakthrough of large language models was.
And the author's view is that U.S. AI labs just aren't taking this threat seriously enough.
That's his strong assertion. He highlights what he sees as a fundamental lack of focus on robust security measures by most leading U.S. AI labs. He anticipates a significant escalation in Chinese espionage efforts as they fully grasp the strategic importance of AGI potentially involving billions of dollars, thousands of people, extreme measures.
So what does he see as the solution to this security problem? Can the labs fix it themselves?
He argues, no, not really. Securing AGI and superintelligence will require government intervention due to the scale of the threat posed by state-level actors.
State actors are different.
Right. He points out that even a massive tech company like Microsoft is regularly targeted and breached by sophisticated state-sponsored hackers. He cites expert opinions suggesting that even with significant private security upgrades, China would likely still be able to exfiltrate AGI model weights if it became their absolute top priority.
So only the government can handle it.
He believes only the government has the necessary infrastructure, expertise, and legal authority for this level of security. Things like intensive background checks and vetting for researchers, the legal power to imprison people for leaks, robust physical security for data centers, and the deep knowledge of agencies like the NSA regarding state-sponsored cyber attacks and how to defend against them.
He also touches on the potential consequences if China were to gain a lead or even just keep pace with the U.S. by stealing this tech.
Yeah, he warns that China might be able to outbuild the U.S. in terms of computing infrastructure. They're good at building big things fast.
Yeah.
And might also have fewer ethical concerns or safety hesitations about pushing AI development rapidly. But even if they only match the U.S. in model capabilities by stealing secrets, he believes that could be enough for them to win the race to superintelligence, simply because they might push harder or faster.
The speed matters.
Hugely. He stresses that a U.S. lead of, say, 1 to 2 years would provide a reasonable buffer, a margin for ensuring safety, whereas a lead of just 1 to 2 months would result in a dangerous, frantic neck-and-neck competition with extreme risks of mistakes or cutting corners on safety.
That's a tight margin.
Very.
Yeah.
He draws a historical comparison to the intense secrecy surrounding the atomic bomb project during World War II, the Manhattan Project, contrasting it with the relatively open, publish or perish nature of AI research today. His conclusion is stark. The current state of AI lab security is, in his words, worse than a random defense contractor making bolts, despite the immense national security implications.
Wow, that's a strong statement. Okay, the third major challenge, superalignment. What's the core of this problem?
Superalignment is the fundamental challenge of reliably controlling AI systems that are vastly more intelligent than humans.
Controlling smarter than us AI.
Exactly.
Huh.
The author explains that our current main method for guiding AI behavior, reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, basically relies on humans being able to understand and evaluate the AI's actions. We tell it good job or bad job.
Okay.
This approach, he argues, simply won't scale to AI systems with truly superhuman intelligence. It's like trying to teach advanced calculus to someone who only understands basic arithmetic, or maybe trying to supervise Einstein by only understanding high school physics. You just can't evaluate their work properly.
So as AI gets smarter, our ability to effectively guide it diminishes. We fall behind.
Exactly. He mentions the potential for misbehavior, unintended consequences, or even deliberate deception by superintelligence. And this is happening as we're integrating AI into critical systems, including military applications.
High stakes.
Very. He emphasizes that without solving the alignment problem, figuring out how to instill reliable goals and ethical constraints in these superintelligent systems, there's no guarantee they will remain aligned with human values or even obedient to our commands. The rapid pace of the predicted intelligence explosion makes this problem even more urgent. We might not have much time.
What are some of the specific technical difficulties in achieving superalignment? Why is it so hard?
He gives the example of a superhuman AI generating millions of lines of code in a completely novel programming language it invented.
Okay.
Humans wouldn't be able to understand or evaluate that code. We couldn't check it for subtle security flaws, hidden backdoors, or ensure it does what we actually intended. RLHF becomes useless in that scenario.
Right, you can't give feedback on what you don't understand.
Precisely. He also points out that even the first AGI systems capable of automated AI research will likely already be substantially superhuman in many intellectual domains, like coding or strategic reasoning. The problem starts before we even hit full superintelligence.
The author discusses the need for good science and reliable metrics for superalignment. Why are those so crucial? We need to know if it's working.
Yes. He emphasizes that to ensure safety during the chaos of the intelligence explosion, we need to be able to verify that our alignment methods are actually working reliably. This requires developing a strong scientific understanding of how these advanced AI systems think interpretability and creating robust, trustworthy ways to measure whether they are becoming misaligned or developing hidden goals.
Which sounds incredibly difficult.
He acknowledges how incredibly difficult it will be to truly reverse engineer or fully understand a superhuman AI. He compares it to the challenge of fully understanding the human brain, where we might get glimpses, but full comprehension. Probably not.
Does he see any hope for understanding them?
Well, he does mention the potential benefit that early AGI systems might initially explain their reasoning via chains of thought in English tokens, which could aid interpretability for a while.
Ah, thinking out loud.
Right. But he suggests this is unlikely to be their most efficient or long-term way of operating. Eventually, their internal thought processes might become completely opaque to us.
Given the rapid and volatile nature of the intelligence explosion he predicts, what are the key concerns regarding alignment during that period?
The author highlights that this will be an incredibly fast-moving and high-pressure period. Think rapid technological advancements happening maybe weekly or daily, intense international competition, and very little time for humans to make critical decisions based on often ambiguous data.
A chaotic environment.
Extremely. He stresses that aligning human-level AI, which is already hard, won't be sufficient preparation for these vastly more capable superhuman systems. He concludes that getting automated alignment techniques, right techniques that can scale during the intelligence explosion, is incredibly high stakes. It demands a significant commitment of computing resources specifically to alignment research now, and requires developing strong, verifiable guarantees of safety before we unleash these systems fully.
Okay. The document then shifts to a broader perspective, arguing that the free world must prevail in this AI race. What's the central point of this argument? It sounds quite geopolitical.
It is. The author argues that superintelligence will provide such a decisive economic and military advantage that the race to AGI becomes essentially a matter of survival for democratic nations, the free world.
A decisive advantage. How decisive?
He uses the Gulf War as an example, where a roughly 20-30-year lead in military technology led to a completely overwhelming victory for the U.S.-led coalition.
Right, the technological gap was huge.
He argues that a similar, but potentially even more dramatic military advantage could be gained with even a short lead, maybe just 1 to 3 years in superintelligence. He suggests it could compress a century of military technological progress into less than a decade.
A century in a decade. What kind of progress?
Things like superhuman hacking capabilities that could disable entire networks instantly, autonomous robotic armies, the rapid development of novel weapons of mass destruction, but also potentially powerful new defensive systems against those same threats. The whole landscape changes.
He raises concerns about China's potential to compete in this race, even if they are currently perceived as being behind in some areas. What are his main points there? We touched on stealing secrets.
Right. Besides the risk of espionage, he discusses China's proven ability to manufacture advanced chips domestically. He notes that their Huawei Ascend 910B chip shows comparable performance to some of NVIDIA's earlier high-end offerings, like the A100.
So they can make powerful chips.
Yes. While there are questions about the scale of their production using current techniques under sanctions, he suggests they could focus their 7-millimeter production capacity heavily on AI chips if they prioritize it.
And infrastructure.
He also points out China's superior ability, generally speaking, to rapidly build large-scale infrastructure power plants, data centers, high-speed rail. This makes it plausible they could outbuild the U.S. in constructing the massive AI training facilities needed for the race.
So compute build-out is a potential advantage for them.
Potentially. But his biggest concern remains his belief that due to, in his view, inadequate security in U.S. AI labs, China will be able to steal the critical algorithmic breakthroughs for AGI, potentially negating any U.S. technological advantage anyway.
The author also raises the specter of authoritarian peril if a dictator were to wield superintelligence. What are the potential dangers he outlines there?
He warns that the dictator equipped with superintelligence would possess unprecedented power, capable of both dominating other nations militarily and economically, and ruthlessly controlling their own population.
How so internally?
He envisions AI-powered surveillance systems with near-perfect accuracy, analyzing behavior, predicting dissent. AI-controlled robotic police forces that are tireless and implacable. The ability to instantly identify and suppress any opposition through things like perfect lie detection or monitoring communications. It could potentially lock in their authoritarian power indefinitely, eliminating any internal threat to their rule.
Chilling.
Given the CCP's history and current actions, he mentions the Uyghur camps, Hong Kong, pervasive surveillance, suppression of dissent, and stated aims for a China-centric world order. He stresses the immense danger of such power falling into authoritarian hands.
So, according to the author, maintaining a lead in this race isn't just about economic or military dominance, but about something much more fundamental, protecting democracy itself.
Absolutely. He argues that maintaining a healthy lead is also crucial for safety. He makes an interesting point that historically, as technology advances, the curve of destruction per dollar often decreases, meaning more advanced weapons can sometimes be more precise or have less collateral damage relative to their power, although obviously that's debatable.
Yeah.
But his main safety concern here is the existential risk that superintelligence could enable the creation of entirely new and terrifying means of mass destruction, novel, bioweapons, nanoweapons, things we can't even conceive of now.
And proliferation.
And the risk that this core technology, the AI, model weights or key algorithms, could proliferate to rogue states and terrorist groups if not tightly secured. He uses North Korea's existing bioweapons program as a chilling example of a threat that could be exponentially amplified by access to superintelligence.
What approach does the author suggest the U.S. should take to navigate this dangerous landscape? How do we win and stay safe?
He argues that the U.S. must take a leadership role, use its potential lead to establish and enforce global safety standards and norms for AI development and deployment, drawing parallels to the international non-proliferation regime for nuclear weapons.
Lead by example and enforce rules.
Right. He believes a significant lead provides room to maneuver, allowing the U.S. to prioritize safety during the potentially chaotic intelligence explosion without fearing falling behind competitively.
What about China and other rivals?
He even suggests that once a decisive U.S. advantage seems likely, the U.S. should potentially offer a kind of deal or détente to China, and other potential adversaries may be exchanging non-interference and potentially some shared controlled benefits of AI for strict adherence to non-proliferation agreements and safety norms.
A grand bargain.
Something like that. He concludes this section by emphasizing, again, the incredibly high stakes of international AI competition, where even a short lead of months could be decisive in military conflict, and therefore the paramount importance of the free world, democratic nations, coming out ahead in this race.
The final major section of the document is called the project. What exactly is he referring to here? It sounds ominous, like Manhattan Project level.
The project is the author's prediction of the inevitable creation of a large-scale, government-led AGI development project, likely emerging around 2027 or 2028.
Inevitable. Why?
He argues that individual startups, even the big AI labs like OpenAI or Google DeepMind, are simply not equipped to handle the immense geopolitical security and safety implications of superintelligence. He believes it will inevitably become a matter of core national security, requiring direct government involvement and control.
What makes him think this government project is unavoidable? Why can't private industry handle it?
He draws an analogy to the U.S. government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He points out that even though the potential threat might have been recognized by some early on, it wasn't until the danger became undeniably existential and widespread that truly extraordinary government measures were taken. Operation Warp Speed, massive spending, etc.
Right, the crisis forced action.
He anticipates a similar, though perhaps delayed, reaction to the rapidly advancing capabilities of AI. He foresees a growing consensus among scientists, tech executives, and government officials, probably around 2025-2027, as the real-world impact and potential danger of exponential AI progress become undeniable, maybe triggered by some alarming AI demonstrations or incidents. This, he thinks, will eventually lead to serious discussions about an AGI Manhattan project, culminating in the full involvement of the national security apparatus.
How does he imagine this project would actually work? Would the government nationalize OpenAI?
He suggests various possibilities, noting that it might not necessarily be a literal nationalization in the traditional sense. He envisions a more complex collaboration,
Like what?
perhaps involving defense contractors, joint ventures between the major cloud computing companies who own the infrastructure, the AI labs who have the talent, and the government providing funding, security, and overall direction, effectively placing the most advanced AI development under the umbrella of national security with government oversight.
A public-private partnership, but government-led.
Essentially. He even speculates that leading Western AI labs might voluntarily agree to merge into this national effort, perhaps under pressure or recognizing the necessity. Given the massive scale of investment required, those hundreds of billions or trillions, he also believes congressional involvement for funding and oversight will be absolutely necessary, providing some checks and balances.
Why does the author believe the project is the only viable path forward? Why is it necessary?
He argues it's essential for several reasons. First, defending against the kind of all-out state-sponsored espionage he anticipates requires government-level security capability.
Right, locking down the labs.
Second, ensuring a clear and responsible chain of command for technology this powerful. He explicitly contrasts this with the potential risks of having unchecked control rest with private CDOs, suggesting it needs democratic government oversight, similar to nuclear weapons. Third, managing the severe safety and alignment challenges of superintelligence, which might require globally coordinated efforts only governments can orchestrate. Fourth, leveraging superintelligence effectively and safely for national defense. And finally, uniting democratic nations into a coalition for managing international competition and establishing global non-proliferation efforts for dangerous AI.
So, national security becomes the dominant frame.
He stresses that national security will be the primary lens through which the endgame of AGI development will inevitably be viewed.
He also touches on the need to rapidly adapt our military forces in anticipation of these advancements. What does he say there?
Yeah, he emphasizes the urgent need to start thinking now about how to reshape U.S. military capabilities to integrate superintelligence for defensive purposes. How do we defend against the novel threats that superintelligence itself might enable, like highly advanced cyber warfare, sophisticated autonomous weapons, or AI-accelerated bioweapons? We need defenses ready.
The author also reiterates the critical importance of security within this government project. It keeps coming up.
Absolutely. He hammers this point home. He argues that the current lack of robust security in private AI labs is the Achilles heel that could lead to China simply stealing AGI and superintelligence, negating any U.S. lead.
And the project fixes this.
He argues it's the only way to fix it adequately. He explains that properly securing AGI will require deep collaboration from the U.S. intelligence community, NSA, CIA, FBI, potentially involving significant restrictions on AI labs and researchers, like intense vetting, monitoring, and the establishment of secure, potentially air-gapped, government-provided computing infrastructure, secure enclaves.
That sounds intense.
It would be. He also describes the intelligence explosion phase as intensely dynamic and high-stakes, a fog of war, where critical decisions about safety and deployment will need to be made quickly based on incomplete or ambiguous information. This highlights the need for competent, experienced leadership within the project.
What's his final assessment of the project? Is he optimistic about its potential? Does he think it will work?
While acknowledging that any large government undertaking will inevitably face challenges, bureaucracy, politics, potential inefficiencies,
Sure.
he concludes that the project is the only sane option, the only realistic way to navigate the immense difficulties ahead and ensure the free world comes out ahead and manages the risks.
Better than the alternatives.
Exactly. He emphasizes that the question isn't if, but when this government initiative will begin, arguing strongly that sooner is much, much better, primarily to address the critical security vulnerabilities before AGI is achieved and to start preparing for the immense challenges of alignment and deployment.
Get ahead of the curve.
Right. He also stresses the importance of building a strong international coalition of democratic nations to work together on this. And he concludes that the ultimate success or failure will hinge on the competence with which the project is executed. Competence is key.
Wow. This has been a truly deep dive covering a huge amount of ground, really, from the technical likelihood of rapid AI progress to its profound national security and global consequences.
Indeed. The central prediction of achieving superintelligence before the end of this decade, while it might sound like science fiction to many, it's presented here with a powerful conviction. It's rooted in the author's detailed analysis of current trends, counting those OMs, and what he perceives as the visceral feeling, the insights of those working right at the forefront of AI development.
Yeah, that situational awareness he talks about. The author closes with a rather sobering thought, doesn't he? Highlighting the fact that there isn't some ready-made crack team or established plan waiting in the wings to handle this,
Right.
and emphasizing the immense responsibility that rests on a relatively small number of people, mostly in tech and policy, who currently have this situational awareness.
Yeah, it's a bit unnerving. It's a call to really think about the immense implications if these predictions are even partially correct, and the urgent need for more people to understand this rapidly changing landscape. His final words in the essay, "See you in the desert, friends," really capture that feeling, that sense of profound change, high stakes, and venturing into uncharted territory, much like the dawn of the atomic age.
See you in the desert.
Definitely evokes that. And that leaves us with a final question for you, our listener. Given the potential for such rapid and transformative change in AI, as outlined here, what fundamental assumptions about the future, maybe about careers or economics or geopolitics, might we need to reevaluate today? What seemingly far-off possibilities might actually be much closer than we think? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.